Hello and welcome in. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoy here for the SoonerScoop.com studios. If that comes across stupid, guess whose idea it was?
It was my idea.
No, I think it was good. Today's the day. Oklahoma officially in the Southeastern Conference. We were over in Oklahoma City today. Everything kind of kicked off on Sunday night. Had the 5K. Unfortunately, I was not able to run.
Neither was I.
Doctor's orders on my part. I'm training for the Ironman.
Laziness on my part.
Interesting. At least we're honest about it.
Yes.
No, it is a big day here in Norman. A lot of stuff happening. Obviously, everything started last night with the 5K. They had the fireworks display over at the stadium on Sunday evening. That rolled into Monday morning. And both of us were over at Toby Keith's Bar and Grill in Oklahoma City this morning. A lot of the Oklahoma contingent was up in Tulsa as well. This is some of the scenes there. A really good cast of characters, I guess we could say. Chris Plank, obviously, was at the party in Oklahoma City this morning. Joe Castiglione spoke. President Harris spoke. It was I guess to a certain extent, George, it was something of a pep rally. They had some of the coaches there as well. Patty Gasso was there. KG Kindler.
Ryan Hibble.
Who else was there?
Audra
Cohen from the OU women's tennis team. I almost said volleyball because we were talking about that earlier, but a really good time down there today. And I don't know, if nothing else, it was a kickoff to what is today with the celebration that is here in Norman.
Yeah, I thought it was cool just to see the amount of people that showed up for that. I know you were doing radio when they let them in, but I think that it's kind of cool, being a Monday morning, how many fans have showed up. We'll see, what it's like. I think that it'll be kind of subdued until this evening,
sure.
Just because people have work and jobs and stuff. But I know there's a big line over at the track field where they're going to be doing the equipment sale or whatever that they do every year. But I think it's going to be super fun today, and had a special guest in today to talk a little SEC, getting ready for that. But you and I going on Feinbaum at 5:30.
We're going on Paul's show today. It's going to be a
big day for you. You've already done
it. You've already done it.
Are you nervous?
No, not at all. But I mean, not really. In comparison to having to moderate a interview and a Q&A with Jack Nicklaus, it's been a pretty good couple weeks. So we'll ease into that. I have some questions for him. I think that will, I don't know, maybe make some headlines later today. I ran a couple across to you earlier, but it is a big day. Oklahoma's officially in the Southeastern Conference. I'm sure that if you are, unless you're living under a rock, you know about this. This has been a long time coming, and we figured that there was nobody better to bring in than Michael Bratton from SEC, that SEC podcast. I'm sure that there's a lot of people. We've both been on the show with him and his cousin Shane. Really good guys in terms of what is to come with the SEC.
Yeah, you know him as SEC Mike on Twitter, and he's been kind of tweeting out stuff as he's been in town. I think he got in town late Saturday, maybe early Sunday, and kind of just touring campus. And it was great to talk to him because there's like few people, probably him and Paul Feinbaum, know the SEC as well as they do. I mean, they really know it. And Mike and cousin Shane, they have a really funny podcast. I was telling you before we get on here, they kind of sling it, and you'll hear it from Mike. He is not afraid to share his opinion.
Without further ado, here is our conversation with Michael Bratton. Hello and welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com studios. It is now our pleasure to be joined by Michael Bratton from that SEC podcast. I'm sure that, as Oklahoma continues this evolution and move into the Southeastern Conference, there's going to be a lot of people that are familiar with your work. But welcome to Norman. Welcome in on the big day here in Norman.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is tremendous. First time to Norman, so this is great. And, quickly becoming known as a Longhorn antagonistic. So
okay.
I chose Norman for a reason.
Yeah.
I said to hell with Austin. You know what?
You're gonna be I think welcomed and comfortable. That was kind of where we were gonna start though. Like, this is your first time down to Norman. I think that there's so much talk about everything that goes into this move. How does just the city of Norman kind of compare to some of the other places that Oklahoma fans are going to be headed out to here over the course of the fall?
Well, if I'm being honest, I was a little underwhelmed when I first arrived because I was like, this is where the football power is, you know? And I'm not talking about Norman.
Sure.
This is Oklahoma City, and really the drive to Oklahoma City. But then I got here, and I understand it. The facility is fantastic. The stadium is just incredible. The entire campus is just maintained to such perfection, and everybody's been kind and great. And the only problem is it's 1,000 degrees right now.
Yeah.
But again, that is SEC right there.
It's like I told you, like before we got started, and George knows this growing up here. we got about 2 more months. We got about 2 more months of this hellacious weather outside.
Mike, I want to ask you about, I know that you've been out kind of talking to some fans today, yesterday. I know you guys are kind of maybe putting together a video of that. What's been your interaction like with OU fans? Because I think we'll get into the football side of things and athletics, and is OU ready for the competition? But I think another question that a lot of fans have is, are they ready to be, in that same category as some of these passionate fans? What have you maybe experienced just interacting with the folks of Oklahoma?
Well, I think, they say online is not real life, and I've felt that here.
Yeah.
Because online we're 12-0, 11-1. I said 9-3 the other day, and sooner people were like, "Get the hell out of here." That's a joke. But on the streets, it's a little bit more conservative. They'd be happy with 10-2, things of that nature. But everyone is fired up, and I've been trying to get people to troll Missouri and Eli Drinkwitz. They won't do it. Yeah. Half the people don't know who he is, which maybe that tells you a little bit all you need to know about Missouri football right there.
Yeah. It's the weirdest thing, because I think that there is like this, everybody knows the A&M side of it. Everybody knows Missouri, haven't been in the Big 12, even the Big 8 way back in the day. But like for my generation, Missouri was never this, at least I never saw them as this big rival.
Right.
I think that there's a lot of people that, as Oklahoma makes this move, that they've pointed to Missouri as, okay, that's going to be that second tier, whatever rival for Oklahoma.
Well, the problem is Missouri doesn't have a rival in the SEC, and they've tried to manufacture Arkansas. Quite frankly, they have owned Arkansas. So it's not a rivalry for the wrong reasons, because the Razorbacks are not competitive. So, they're dying for one. And Oklahoma, I know Oklahoma's got bigger, Texas and things of that nature. But to Missouri, it's a natural rivalry. And I know they've owned them.
Yeah.
But Missouri's different. I mean, I think Missouri's going to be really good. They're actually my pick to not win the SEC, but play in the SEC championship game.
It's a rabid fan base.
Oh yeah, and I was gonna say I don't know like long term if it can be a rivalry, but if they go to that pod scheduling where you have the same 3 teams every year that you're facing, and I would assume Missouri would be one of them. Maybe it forms into one. I think it is this year somewhat of a rivalry just because of the Caden Green stuff.
Yep.
Luther Burden was somebody they wanted. Drinkowitz is somebody that OU fans clearly don't like, at least online. Like you said, I think the majority of OU fans would be like, who is that? But I want to ask you too, Mike, like what is the perception of SEC schools of Oklahoma? Like what is the outside perspective as Oklahoma enters this? I think we kind of have a feeling of what they think of Texas, because everybody has an opinion of Texas. But what do they think of OU coming in here?
Oh, they think they're just going to get their ass handed to them, and they're Big 12 was like junior league football, and I don't even think they're aware of how many championships. I mean, that's another thing coming to this campus, all these statues. I mean, it blows my mind, and you guys are obviously not putting up average statues up here. These are Heisman winners, national champions, and it's not 2 or 3. Like at Tennessee, I'm a Tennessee graduate. They've had a Neyland Stadium forever, but recently they've added like 2 more. So I was like, oh, okay, they got a statue here too at Oklahoma, and then there's one there. There's one there. There's how many are there? There's got to be at least a dozen.
Yeah, there's how many Heisman trophies? 7, and then Heisman plus trophies, the Selman brothers.
The Selman brothers have a statue. Bob has a statue up.
Barry
Southside. Barry has a statue. Yeah, and that's like one of those things that I think that for a lot of people out there that watch this program on YouTube, we get so wrapped up into this Oklahoma bubble of nothing's ever good enough. I mean, hell, Brent wins 10 games a year ago, and you would have thought that the world was caving in during those weeks of the Kansas loss and the Oklahoma State loss, and particularly the way they lost those games. But I do think that we get so sucked into this Oklahoma bubble. It's nice to kind of get an outsider perspective on, this thing still is a really good brand. It's adding to the SEC, which is obviously the best conference in the country. It's still weird to say that. It's still getting used to saying that. But at the same time, there is going to be a lot of fun to be had here over, however many years in this new era of college athletics.
Oh, it's going to be a blast. But the biggest thing I have is I think Oklahoma can compete with anybody on their schedule, but can they do it week in, week out?
Sure.
And particularly the tail end.
Sure.
Ole Miss, I think it's at Ole Miss, Missouri, at Missouri. I'm telling you, that's going to be the biggest game on Missouri's schedule. And then Alabama, LSU. I mean, if you have a key injury here or there, it could derail that entire run.
For on three, George, you wrote about ranking like the conference schedule 1 through 8, and we sat up in the office here one day. You could, outside of like maybe 1 and 2, you could make an argument for 3 through 8.
Yeah.
Either way, whatever game. If you wanted to put 8 in the 3rd spot, you certainly could do it.
Yeah, I mean, South Carolina's the only one that you're kind of like pretty sure that it's at the bottom. But like I was sitting there, I think I had Auburn as 7. I'm like, that's a really tough football game.
Sure,
going to Jordan-Hare, their first real SEC road game in the conference.
Jackson Arnold's first road start, true road start.
You got Tennessee at home, who I think Tennessee's going to be really good this year. I think you're right, though, that back half of the schedule where I think it's at Ole Miss, then I think they get Maine at home, then at Missouri, Alabama at home, and then at LSU to end the season. It's like in all those games, maybe not the Alabama game, but some of those are like just coin flips. It's like if you can win, 2 of those 3 in LSU, Ole Miss, and Missouri, maybe you can get to 9 wins or 10 wins, and you get 9 or 10 wins this year. I think you are making the college football playoff with that schedule.
And one thing I would like to add for OU, credit to them. Everywhere I look, the fans, like I said, the facility, the team, I'm seeing SEC ready, SEC ready, SEC ready. Schedule in Maine late in the season. You are SEC ready. There you go.
That's when you know it's official, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Oklahoma, and not only the move, because I think that it's been reflected. Obviously, the softball experience is going to be much different. The baseball experience is going to be much different. Good news for Oklahoma fans with Skip Johnson, the 5-year extension that was agreed upon on Friday with everything that happened in College Station last week and Austin. But from a football perspective, when you look at this Oklahoma team and the kind of the turnaround that they had to make in that second year under Brent, what do you make of them moving into the SEC as a football program and being quote-unquote SEC ready?
Well, I think they're going to have one of the best defenses in the conference day one, which I think that'll be big because for years, that's what the SEC was built on, was defense. But it's shifted in years past. It's more of an offensive league. It's a quarterback league. So I think coming in, Georgia obviously will probably have the best defense. They have the best athletes. But I think Alabama's taken a big step back without Nick Saban. Not overall, but on defense. Sure. I think they'll be better on offense. So, again, I'm not sure that Alabama's even going to have a defense as good as Oklahoma. So that I think the defense could really carry the Sooners this year. I'm fascinated by that. They have maybe the best receiving core in the entire SEC too, which is saying something. In this conference, which I don't know, you guys I'm sure are well aware of how many damn draft picks the SEC has. It's half the receivers that go on to the NFL too. So to say you walk in day one and have one of, if not the best receiving core, that's a huge, huge thing to have as well.
There's some Oklahoma secondaries that have been terrorized by some of those wide receivers. But I think there's a lot of people that still think back to that 2019 Peach Bowl against LSU and going in. I remember doing radio in the weeks leading up to that and even the week of the game in Atlanta thinking, OU's going to be fine. They're going to score points. And then all of a sudden it was just a bombardment of over-the-top passes.
That LSU team was
They were unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest in college football history.
I think so.
Just totally loaded. But I want to ask you about your opinion on Brent Venables, because I know you did a show, I think it was Friday, that they announced his extension,
right?
Big bump in pay, I think around $1 million in a raise. What did you think of that, and what is just your overall opinion of Brent heading into what is now just his third season here?
Yeah, well, certainly when that was announced, I was a little taken back by it. Mm-hmm. And again, you got to not run with headlines. You got to actually and I like to do that, despite what some people may think. So, once you dig into it, really just a 2-year bump, two-year extension, and still I did it on the show. I think he's like 9th or 10th in pay in the SEC. Yeah. So again, is he worth that? I think he is. So from those aspects, it's a nothing burger. But personally, I think I would have liked to seen how Oklahoma does year one in the SEC. And particularly, I'm a big believer in a first time head coach, seeing how he does with his second round of coordinators. Because I think a lot of coaches, like Sam Pittman, he aced his coordinators right out the gate. He looked like a hell of a coach. He can't replace him.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's the case with Brent Venables. I've heard nothing about, Zach Alley and obviously Seth Luttrell's got such a history here. It's not a concern, but I can't tell you how many times a coordinator gets hired and it's not a concern until the fall.
Right.
And then it's, what the hell have we done here? So I don't know. I would have waited a year, but I understand the logic in giving it to him. But I would also push back because I've heard a lot of Oklahoma fans, well, this is our way of showing commitment. Recruiting's going well. But I would also argue, if you have to give someone an extension to show how committed you are to them, how committed are you really?
Sure. I think
it's a great point.
We were coming from an optic standpoint, like in just kind of a inflation, all that kind of stuff, keeping up with the Joneses, if you will. And like you said, like you look down and the Oklahoma head coach is being paid 7th, 8th, 9th in the SEC. That's still not that big of a jump, even like recruiting rankings, as well as they've recruited here over the course of, certainly the first 3 years of Brent. You look up and they're like 5th in the SEC. They're like 8th in the country, but 5th in the SEC. Right. And it's like, I think that's just another reminder of where you're headed.
Yeah, I think this year is just such a big year for Brent and what they're trying to build. Because I think there's a lot of people that believe in Brent in the building. I would say everybody in the building believes in what Brent's building. It's like what you said, like, let's see it this year. And that doesn't mean they need to go out and win 10 games. I think if they went 9-3 next year, that'd be a huge success. Because like I said, I think that maybe you could sneak into the playoff. If you win 9 games, you're obviously beating some really good football teams on your schedule. But if they go 7-5, people are not going to be too happy.
It's not going to be a fun time around the Crimson Corner. I can tell you that. That's the message board. It will. It might melt down. It's also one of those things too that you look at where they're headed, and you look at the schedule. It can become a little bit. I think there is a reason for cautious optimism just in terms of what that schedule is. And I think that the one thing that we've talked about on the YouTube show here, basically since the end of last season, you look at the games that Oklahoma hasn't won in the first 2 years. They're 3-7 in one-score games. Mm-hmm. I would imagine you're going to be in a lot of those types of games this year. That's kind of the big thing for me is how are you going to be able to find ways to win, and especially if you're kind of leaning back on a defense, which is still a little bit foreign for Oklahoma fans to have to go, all right, let's send the defense out there. You're going to need to get a 3-and-out in Columbia, or even on September 28th when you go to Auburn. You might have to lean on the defense if Jackson Arnold struggles to take care of the football, which has been a problem. Small sample size, just the Alamo Bowl. But I think starting a true freshman on the road, you're going to have to live with some turnovers.
And it also surprised me because I'd say about at least 95% of the fans and stuff, it seems like they're fully on board with Brent Venables. Yep. So I thought it was all good. But I heard from someone that would know, they told me if there's one guy that is not on the hot seat that you got to watch, it's Venables. Now, this was months ago, so things maybe have changed. But, that took me back when I heard that. So I thought he was on not a short leash by any means, but just kind of I was told people in power maybe not firm on him. But again, obviously, a contract extension states otherwise.
Sure.
And I think that it depends on probably who you talk to. But I do think that when they hired Brent, they said, okay, we know this is going to be a long-term project, because when Lincoln left, he left with a lot. And I think they knew that this was going to take some time. But at the same time, this is an impatient fan base. I don't know if it's an impatient athletic department. I think they know that this is going to take some time. But like I said, if they go out and they go 7-5 next year, you better believe 2025 is a huge year for Brent Venables and this staff.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I think at the same time it's going to be a lot of fun, because there are some places, and even as tough as that schedule is, when you realize that Oklahoma fans or media going to be headed to Oxford, going to be headed to Auburn, going to be headed to Baton Rouge, whether Oklahoma fans want to go back there or not down in that area. I don't think that it's always kind of been a thing around OU football. The experience of the Sugar Bowl in 2003 probably wasn't the most welcoming experience from the LSU faithful.
Every Oklahoma person. I had no idea this was a thing. Apparently this is a big deal.
There were, I think, experiences on Bourbon Street that usually go untold.
Right.
These are the experiences that everybody talks about.
Right.
And it's not in Rick's Cabaret, which I've been to many a times. It's a fine establishment. It is. It's a very nice place.
Going off that, Mike, tell us, what can fans expect from traveling to some of these games? They get to go to Oxford, Baton Rouge. What are, I guess, what's the one city that you're like, you got to go on that trip? Maybe this year, or maybe it's a future opponent. What are some of the attractions, I guess?
It's definitely Baton Rouge for me.
Yeah.
Because I've been to a couple music festivals. It's the only thing I've come close to seeing a music festival is Baton Rouge at night.
Yeah.
It's insane. And they'll be a little rough to you.
Yeah.
But that's all across the board at the SEC.
Yeah.
I went on a road trip to Oregon one time, and I was just blown away at how nice those people were. I was like, oh, this is the way it should be. You go back to the SEC, it's F you, they spit on you, they throw stuff on you. So you're going to get that across the board. But Baton Rouge, the food, the ladies, everything. It is incredible. Oxford is another great one that is a must-see. Hell, they're all good.
I thought for the most part, And our trip to Knoxville was kind of where we ended up having to drive out. Our flights were going to miss the connecting flight. But just in the limited time that I was in Knoxville, awesome.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. And the return of Josh Heupel coming up on September 21st, which, it seems like things are starting to progress in the right direction for Josh, which I think back in the day, like when they hired him in Tennessee, I think that there was a lot of people around here that thought, no, that's not really going to work.
Right.
And he's been awesome.
That was universal across Tennessee fans too.
Yeah.
If you look at his record at Central Florida, it got worse every year.
Yeah.
And he inherited what Scott Frost built. So a lot of people were hesitant on it, but right out the gate, it was exciting. It was fun. And then obviously the big second year. But I think Josh Heupel's got a lot on the line this year to show that because I think maybe not universally, but a lot of people had him as a top 10 coach in the country last year after the 11-win season. And I think, his stock took a little bit of a hit. But they won 9 games.
Sure.
Which is, for the last 20 years at Tennessee, that's like a top 5 record. So it's not like the wheels fell off or anything, but they're spending all this money on Nico. They got to see what they get out of him. If he's a top 10 coach, I think Tennessee makes the playoff this year.
As Oklahoma joins the SEC, is it still Alabama, Georgia? Is that where everybody's trying to get to? Or maybe even more so Georgia just is kind of ahead of Alabama even over the last couple of years, even at the end of Nick's run?
Yeah, no, it's Georgia. No, I've been calling Alabama the decaying dynasty for a reason. One national championship non-COVID year since 2017. So, yeah, they were done with. So it's Georgia. But again, how long can you sustain that?
Sure.
Because Nick Saban was the only one that could do it decades on end. Because when I grew up, it was Southern Cal did it for 3 or 4 years. Miami could do it 3. Ohio State, Urban at Florida. I mean, it was all these people could do it for 3 or 4, but then issues started rising. And I don't know. I still think Georgia's the best, but you're starting to see kind of chinks in the armor a little bit. You know what I mean? Where they're getting issues off the field. And I think last year, the one game Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey were banged up was that Alabama game, and they just weren't the same.
Yeah.
And their defense, they just went on such an incredible run on defensive linemen. I don't know we'll ever see a run like that again. That was the backbone of winning 2 national championships.
Sure.
And they didn't have that last year. And their run defense, it was not awful, but it was around 25th in the country, whereas they were 1 or 2 the last 3 or 4 years. So you're starting to see a slight slippage. But again, this is Georgia, so I'm like picking at tiny little scabs. They may have the best quarterback in the country. They're loaded. They lost 2 first-rounders on the offensive line. They may have the best offensive line in the SEC. So there's a lot to like about them. But I think they're far and away number 1, and I think it's because of Kirby, because he's just an animal on the recruiting trail. I still don't think – this is a little bit of a hot take. I don't think – I'm fine giving him number 1 coach in the country. I don't think he's that elite of a game day coach. I think he's probably the best recruiter the sport's ever seen.
Sure.
And that counts Nick Saban, because he was with Nick Saban, got a lot of those guys for Nick. And when he went to Georgia, Georgia started recruiting better than Alabama. So they're going to have the best roster, and that's going to win you, obviously, most games in college football.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. What's one team that you think can overachieve, maybe a dark horse? I know you mentioned Missouri earlier. And what's one team that you think's maybe getting a little overhyped that could underachieve this year in the SEC?
Well, overhyped obviously is Texas. Every year is damn overhyped because Sarkisian, I think, is a joke. He's had one good. He's been a coach for 10.
People are going to love this.
We got to clip this. Yeah.
I mean, how many years? He's been 10 or 11 years as a coach. He's won 10 games one time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
had some things break his way to do that.
Right.
This past year.
Last year was his big year. There was 3 games essentially that they had equal talent as him. Alabama, again, great win. Oklahoma lost. Washington lost. So, again, I don't even think that was that great of a coaching job. I just think he ran through a bunch of schmucks in the Big 12. It ain't going to happen. There's going to be about 7 of those teams you got to face in the SEC. So, I don't even think they make the college football playoff. I think all that talk's ridiculous, but we'll see. I think he is a great offensive coordinator. I'm not trying to completely crap on Sark, but as a head coach, I don't know. I don't see it. I think they were – well, people seem to – I don't understand why they overlooked this. They were better on defense last year than they were offense.
Yeah.
And the key was stopping the run.
It's 2 big boys up front.
And they're gone.
Yeah.
So they still have issues in the secondary. I don't know. I think it's going to be tough for them.
There's a reason why Texas basically – it was an OU-Texas battle for Dominic Williams. And
right.
Obviously Oklahoma won it by way of losing Jermaine Lole. It's going to be interesting. And, we always talk about, too, the difference and kind of the interesting case study that Missouri and Ole Miss are going to be, because they've played the NIL game about the exact opposite of how Oklahoma has. Right. And these two teams are, we'll see who's standing at the end of the year kind of thing.
Because their alum are not going to keep giving that money if they don't win.
You wouldn't think so, unless they go the Texas A&M route, where just money isn't a problem.
Right.
Ever.
So my theory, this is just my own personal theory, but I think if Kiffin doesn't win this year, he'll go and take the Florida job and sucker all those people for NIL. He should do it every 3 or 4 years at a different stop, at a proud program that is suffering, that has money that'll throw into NIL. Because I don't think they can do it year in, year out at Ole Miss. I really don't.
What is the Florida situation right now? Because from the outside looking in, it just looks like it's just a complete disaster.
Well, have you seen Billy Napier coach a football game? I mean, he's a complete moron.
Special teams is always an issue. Him last year, so
they had one of the worst defenses in the country. They have a defensive coordinator that's 30 years old, and they hired another defensive coordinator to coach the defensive coordinator, which I don't know, that makes no sense, but that's what they have literally done down there. They've never had a special teams coordinator, even though they have the worst special teams in the country. I mean, and Billy's got like 200 coaches on staff.
Yeah, that thing is unbelievable when you see like the team picture. And it's like all 50 of them sitting up there.
Right.
It's incredible.
And they were clinging to recruiting, and recruiting hit a tailspin late because they were suffering. And right now, I think they have a better recruiting class than Vanderbilt. I think that maybe Mississippi State, but they're like 14,
I saw the
15th.
Graphic the other day, and I was just like, oh boy, Florida
I didn't realize it was that
is
bad.
in trouble. Yeah,
that's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be kind of fun to see. You mentioned Mississippi State, Jeff Levy, a Oklahoma guy, I think is how a bunch of people would call him. I mean, being a graduate from here, but that was such a interesting move too, when all of that went down with Mississippi State, and kind of the angle that comes with Zach Selman, who used to work here, now the athletic director in Starkville. They obviously got their work cut out for him, but I think there was a lot of people that looked up and go, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense for you, Jeff, just in terms of him taking that job.
Right, a lot of jet sweeps coming to Mississippi State. So, but so interestingly, when Kiffin was flirting with the Auburn job, I'm told that had he taken it, they were going to hire Levy to be the new Ole Miss coach, because he was there previously under Kiffin. So same system. So obviously that didn't work out. Now he's at State, but. I mean, we've seen it with Kiffin and Heupel, and obviously at Baylor. I mean, this system works, and at Oklahoma last year. So I think they're going to be fun on offense, which I think that's all you can ask in today's day and age. But I think they're going to be a train wreck on defense. So they're not going to be very good year one, but at least they'll be entertaining. And I think that's the only way you catch up to, and again, catch up's the wrong word, but maybe compete with a lot of the teams in the SEC when you don't have the resources. At least be fun. And if you can score with them, maybe you catch up a couple breaks, an interception here or there. I think that's the path for a Mississippi State to be competitive.
Yeah, I mean, if they can make a bowl game next year, that'd be huge for Levy. I feel like we could pick your brain about every single team in the SEC. My last question is, if you could offer OU fans like one big piece of advice as they enter this thing and get ready for what's going to be, I think, one of the best college football seasons we've seen in a long time, because it feels like it's very unpredictable. But just the move to the SEC, what's in store? What's your biggest piece of advice for them as they get ready?
Oh, just be ready, because everybody's coming for you. You know what I mean? Yeah. They all think you're going to suck. They think you're overrated because you were in the Big 12. They have no respect. I mean, I've had people tell me they're irrelevant. They're bringing irrelevancy to the SEC, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? This is arguably the greatest program in college football history. It's just going to make the SEC that much better. And, man, I wish, again, I'm not a huge fan of the expanded playoff because I'm a little worried about what that will do to the regular season. But I'd be in favor of 7, 8 SEC teams in the playoff, because that's the way it should be, in my opinion. Sure. It's not going to be that way, but for my business, that'd be great. But, yeah, I mean, week in, week out. And that's one thing I'm just fascinated to see. Was Nick Saban dominated it for so long? Will it be Georgia now?
Yeah.
Will it be, God forbid, Texas? I don't think it will be, certainly. But will there be a team that comes up and takes it? Or will it be every 2 to 3 years a different program, comes up and wins it? I'm kind of hoping that's the way it's leaning, but just fascinated because we have no clue how this is going to work. No divisions anymore. Divisions kind of held the SEC back for a good while, so I'm glad there's no more divisions either. I'm fascinated to see how all this plays out. And one thing real quick, George, I forgot – you asked me about who could overachieve. I didn't answer. I just realized one team we haven't talked about. And this annual overhype, speaking of overhype, Texas A&M. Again, I'm not confident in it.
These OU fans are going to absolutely love what you're sending out today.
I mean, they're overrated annually. So they hate me talking about A&M.
Sure.
But I just think Jimbo was such a damn clown.
Yeah.
Get his ass out of here. I think we've upgraded by bringing in Mike Elko. They have all the talent in the world. They got all the money in the world. I'm not expecting them to make the playoff, but I think under Mike Elko, I think they'll get there eventually. I think they could really be one of the better teams in the SEC this year that most people are not projecting to be there.
I love A&M this year too. I think I love their quarterback. I think Elko's a good football coach. They were able to retain some guys, also get some guys in the portal.
All their key games are at home too.
Yeah, and I hate overhyping A&M too because everyone does it every year. But I actually legit think that they could win 9 or 10 games this year.
It's just one of those things. It's like talent acquisition has never been a problem in Austin. It's never been a problem to a certain extent in College Station. It's always been something else. Can everybody stay out of the kitchen? Just let Mike Elko, to a certain extent, cook. Like that seems to be the biggest deal with them. Where can everybody read your stuff?
Yeah, that SEC podcast, #1 SEC podcast, Apple and Spotify, YouTube are blowing up, and just search SEC Mike and I'll pop up. And got a podcast with my cousin Shane. He's the funniest damn guy. He was trying to get down here, but he couldn't get off work. But I think it worked out because I don't know if he'd fit through the doorway here.
Are we going to see you down in Dallas at SEC Media
Cousin
Day?
Shane will be there too.
It feels good that it's going to be somewhat on familiar turf for us. I know that like going out to Nashville last year was a lot of fun. I thought it was set up extremely well, but I guess a little bit more of a Big 12 flair, if you will, being down in Dallas this year. It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be awesome. You got to make it out to OU Texas too. I don't know if you've been to that game.
That's
before.
the one game we want to go to this year.
You got to go because I truly and I get it. They're the new guys in the SEC. I think it is the best game in college football, and it's up there. It's in the same category, I think, and I've never been to the Iron Bowl or the game with Michigan and Ohio State, but I think it's in the same atmosphere.
It's one of the truly great days of college football.
Yeah,
just with everything that goes into the fair, and then you get to the Cotton Bowl. It's just such a unique game that means so much to so many people. I don't know. I think that game particularly is going to fit in quite well with the passion that comes with the SEC. So we appreciate you jumping by. You're going to be over at the Feinbaum set today. I think you're going to jump on right before us. Should be fun. It's going to be your second time. Any advice? It's going to be my first time to really truly meet Paul.
Just try to make him laugh. That's the key to it. And if you do, he'll keep having you back on.
Eddie's good at that.
That's a lot of pressure. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Michael, for joining us here in studio at the Soonerscoop.com home here on Campus Corner. It's going to be a really fun day, and it was a really fun conversation. A little bit of in a way, a peek behind the curtain of what's to come for Oklahoma fans.
I mean, look, he knows as well as anybody. Like I said before we kicked it to the interview, I mean, he knows the SEC like the back of his hand, and I thought it was cool to hear kind of about his favorite places to visit as well as just his thoughts on all these different teams and what's going to happen with Oklahoma and Texas, which I'm sure OU fans enjoyed to hear his take on Texas. So definitely a good guy to follow, I think, this upcoming season as OU fans kind of get adjusted to new life in the SEC.
Plenty more coverage from today down here in Norman. We will be talking to Greg Sankey as well as Joe Castiglione, I believe, is going to be a part of the press. And Joe Harris is going to be a part of the press conference coming up this afternoon at 2:45, right?
Yeah, it should be good to hear from them. I don't know what new information they're going to be sharing with us because, like you've said, I mean, you guys have been covering this for 3 years now. There's not a whole lot of new information. It's more of a day of celebration as they officially get into the SEC. But it'll be interesting to hear from them. Always good to talk to Greg Sankey, who's now leading the charge on this whole thing. So that should be fun. And then obviously Feinbaum this evening.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Stay here, I guess I should say, on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. There is some recruiting news that we can get into. We'll probably catch up with Josh McQuistion on Tuesday for a recruiting report. Oklahoma's 2025 class, possibly adding maybe one, maybe two. I think we could for sure probably forecast maybe one more commitment in that 2025 class today. And there's spots filling up, as we've talked about, on the recruiting report here over the last couple of weeks, as well as, obviously the kind of the stuff that we talked about at the beginning with Mike in terms of Skip Johnson and everything that was kind of haywire at the end of last week. We'll get on a little bit of a stickball report. Going to see some of Love's Field tonight at the open house, all that good stuff. So for George Stoya, I'm Eddie Brodasevich. We'll see you right back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page.